Somebody said to me, if you're on last, that means you're the headliner. So I'm going to try and live up to that this afternoon. So thank you for sticking around until the end. And yes, I am going to be talking about using values for recruitment and retention. I'm from a company called Judgement Index, and the Judgement Index is an assessment tool that measures people's values-based behaviours. So hopefully I'm in a good position to talk about this with you today. And just while we've got this slide up, CMM are obviously big on Twitter. We love a bit of Twitter as well. So if you want to take notes, take photos, if you want to do any tweeting, then please feel free. We're just at Judgement Index. And what I'm going to be talking about today is how you can use values to aid your recruitment and retention strategy, to increase the quality of the staff you get through the door, and to increase that continuity of care as well. And what I'm always really keen to do in my talks is to obviously share bits of research that we do, but also try and give you as many strategies as possible that you can go back and put into place yourself. So I hope that you're going to take something from that today. So what I would like to do is start where most people think of when they think of values in a care context, and that is with values-based interviewing. It's a bit of a buzzword. Is anybody in the room, and I'm going to ask for hands and nods and all the way through today, so is anybody doing values-based interviewing in their business right now? 1. Okay, good. 2, good start. So, and values-based interviewing is
Not male.
There's an update. Let's just smooth that. Values-based interviewing is a great way to start to get under the layers of the person that's coming in for an interview. But what I would say is that values-based interviewing only really goes so far. If you hire people into your business who are good people, then what you might find is that they will actually leave quicker if other things aren't in place. So I like to think of these things as the building blocks and the foundation really that's going to support you to be able to have a very good values-based interviewing strategy. So what I'm going to talk about today is the building blocks that will support that, and we're going to come back to values-based interviewing a little bit later on. And I want to start with probably the most significant, important part, and that is your company values. So who knows their company values? Good. Don't be shy, you can raise your hands. I'm not going to pick on you and ask you what they are. But we would hope that you would know your company values because you're all pretty senior in your organisations. And I'm going to talk in a second about the problem that we'll quite often find with care companies and their company values. But what I want you to have a little think about first of all is what your own personal values are. So they could be, I don't know, whatever your personal values are around perhaps being kind or your family or whatever they may be. And how would you feel if I came along and said to you, these are your values now, and presented you with a new set of values? Well, you might be a little bit resistant to them. You might feel like you don't have ownership of these new values. And in fact, you might disagree with them entirely. And that's something that we often find with care staff when we go into a care home or domiciliary, is we find that quite often the values have been set and you might have no choice in that because they've been set at group level. Is anyone part of a group here today? So they might be set at group level, or they might have been in the environment for so many years. You're not about to change them. But the staff actually don't have any ownership of those values because they start in the business or they work in the business, and there might be some values on the wall, they might be on the website, but actually what I always like to try and think about is what they actually mean to the people working in your business. And we're going to address that shortly. And another problem that we find with many companies, and I'm sure quite a few of you are in the room with different competitors today, is that quite often your values are the same as the other company that's down the road. So I've just taken some values from different company websites, but does anybody have any of these that are up here today? No?
No.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to come and find out what yours are afterwards. Quite often, what you'll find is that your value of, let's say, kindness is being shared with your competitor. So when you have an employee that goes from one business to another, that value of kindness has just been sort of diluted, really. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. And what you'll find is if it doesn't really mean anything, then it really doesn't have much significance at all. Out of interest, does anybody have these ones in capitals? Do you see integrity, respect, excellence, communication? Does anyone know whose company values they were? They were Enron's company values. And I think Enron is a very good lesson for everybody that sometimes you can have a great set of company values, but if the staff don't believe in them, then they really won't live out those company values in practice. So what I would like everybody to do when they leave here, whether you're back in the office, back in the home, back in the working environment, is grab the first employee that you find in your business. I want everyone to do this. I want you to grab them and I want you to ask them, what are our company values? Do you think they'd give you the right answer? Does anyone have complete faith that their staff, any staff member would give them their company values? If they do, great. And I want you to then ask them a second question. I want you to ask them, what do they mean to you? Because that's probably where you find you'll get stuck. Because these are great when they're on a website and they're great when they're written on a wall when you walk into the organisation, but quite often they don't mean anything to the people working there. And I always like to think, if you have someone working for you full-time, let's say her name's Georgina, she comes into work every day, what do these values actually mean to her? And that's what I'd like to work on with you today, because actually the company values can very much drive the culture of the business. So that's what I want us to come on to now. The culture, how you operate and how you can develop culture in your caring environment, because let's face it, you're stuck with these values now, whatever they may be, kindness, respect, integrity. And I want you to think that the way that values drive the culture is if I said my company values are around passion, forward thinking, competitiveness, you're going to get energetic, you're going to get a very specific kind of feel of what it's like to work in my company. But if I say my company values are, kindness, respect, integrity, you want to get a feel for what that's going to be like when somebody walks into the business. And the way that you can do that is by getting your staff together, either in a staff meeting or a workshop, and actually workshopping your own company values. Sitting them down and saying to them, what does it mean to embody these? These are our values, and now we want to find out from you what it means to embody them. Because let's face it, most people come into work and they want to enjoy what they do, and they probably come into care because they want to care for people, and they want to have a good time while they're doing it and get some enjoyment out of work. So if you can start to get people thinking about our culture being shaped by our values, and you start to workshop this, you can actually workshop your own culture statements. So some people say, oh, we're restricted, we're a group, we've got our values, we can't change them. So why not come up with your own developed statements? You can call them value statements, you can call them culture statements, you can make it really simple and just call them how we operate. Take those company values and maybe you'll add in some new ones, but maybe you'll start to come up with a definition of what it should be like to work for you. Now, when you get the staff involved in that, then some quite magical stuff will start to happen. And you can do this yourself. Of course, you can bring in an outside facilitator, like us, but you can actually do this yourself. And what you'll find then is that a definition of dignity, yes, that can be around dignity for the resident or for the client, but it can also be about, I'll keep my dignity if I'm challenged by someone. I mean, how many issues in your environment are created by staff arguing with each other and that sort of thing? So maybe that issue of kindness, the staff might say, okay, well, kindness is about being kind to the people that we support, but it's also about being kind to each other. It's about making up a cup of tea for my colleague if I can see they're struggling that day. And when you can start to build these culture statements, then you're really starting to get a foundation of what it should be like to work at your place. But also what you're doing then is you are giving ownership to your staff of those values. Now what you'll find, and this really is incredible when you can get in there and do that with them, is that when they then own those values, they'll become responsible for them and they'll become empowered by them. So the next time somebody starts to have a bit of a barney in the corridor with another colleague, someone could pick them up on it and say, hey, don't you remember we workshopped these values? That part of our values in this place is that we don't do this here in the corridor. And so you're starting to shift the culture that everybody's becoming empowered, engaged, and responsible. So it can have a really, really big effect. Now, another thing that you can do to capitalise on that is start to create visual reinforcement. So yes, you've got some words on your website, you've got some words on the door when you come in, but what about some boards up that say, what it really means to work there, what it means to embody the company values? We've got a client down in Essex who actually created their culture statements, and then in their every monthly newsletter, they pick a member of staff who's embodied those values, and they write about it. So every month they're having this message reinforced that no, it wasn't just, oh, remember that workshop we did a couple of months ago and nothing's happened since. It's being reinforced on a monthly basis. So you can see now, very quickly, how you can start to shift the culture in the care environment. And what you will find very quickly is who is on board and who is not. And I tend to have quite a mercenary approach to this. And if you've got people that aren't willing to get on board, then maybe it's time for them to get off. So it can be a very good way for you to find out who you would actually like to leave, obviously with a bit of advice from down here. So obviously we've got the values, we've got the culture, and really the culture is being driven by the behaviour of the staff. And quite often people's behaviour is being driven by how they feel. And somebody who's very much in control of how their staff feel is the manager. And that's why, and I know there's been a big theme of leadership that's been spoken about today. I do want to briefly talk about leadership, which in my opinion is the other real foundation of a good care environment. So we're fortunate enough that we've done a lot of work with various leaders and managers in the care industry. And actually what we find is that there are two main issues that we find when we go into, let's say, a care home, for example. And one, and we've covered this today already, I've heard other people talking about it, is the quantity of the tasks and paperwork and procedures, etc., that you have to deal with on a daily basis, and it tends to swallow up the manager's time. And I just want you to kind of hold on to that thought, because I'm going to come back onto that one later. But another piece of research that we've done is around new leaders. So has anybody here become a manager or been promoted within the last 6 months to a year? Fairly recently. Okay, a few people fairly recently. And these are the sort of people that we've done a fair bit of research from. And actually what we find is that I think it's 90% of people in care who are managers are promoted up through the business. And one thing that they're quite often missing is actual leadership or management experience. So what we found is that the biggest area that they're let down is in their own self-confidence and their own sort of confidence to lead others. And it's just an interesting point that we spend a lot of money on training, but how much are we doing on the soft skills for these people? Because quite often, if you've got the experience and you're good at your job, that's when you're promoted. But quite often you don't have that management experience, that leadership experience. So if anybody wants any information about what we find with that and what we do about it, then please feel free to come and grab me at the end. But we've also done a lot of research on outstanding managers. Is anybody rated outstanding in here? Okay, fab. Great. So we were lucky enough last year. John Kennedy mentioned it first thing this morning about some outstanding manager research that we were involved in with another company called Article Consulting. And we got to put a variety of outstanding managers through the Judgement Index assessment and have a look at the qualities. And we actually found that it's pretty remarkable because we already knew what good looks like in care, and this was a real chance to look at what outstanding looks like. Now, when I share this research with you, I know you haven't necessarily taken the assessment, but I think it's a good place for you to sit and maybe have a little think about where you might be. Where are my areas that I think, I could do with a bit of development here? Or where do you think, actually, I'm really great there? I probably would match up with these outstanding managers. So what we found, these are just sort of the match of the day highlights really, but one thing that we found, remember I said that many care managers, you've got such a huge volume of tasks that you have to do on a daily basis. Well, what we found is that these outstanding managers had a very balanced value of people and of the task and of what we call big picture thinking, being able to see over the horizon, think about the consequences of things further down the line. And this is actually quite unusual because, like we said, most managers will be very task focused or they'll be all about people. These outstanding managers seem to have this kind of balanced view across all of them. We found that the outstanding managers all had a very strong self-esteem and confidence, something that we don't see a lot in new leaders. We found one thing that was really significant was that they were all exceptional problem solvers. They were all able to solve things super quick. And this is my obviously non-technical way of describing this. And actually, when we take a group, any group, in any sort of industry or environment, we find that generally it's very senior execs that score extremely well in this. Well, these outstanding managers all scored exceptional. They would be in the top 15% of anybody that we ever see go through this assessment. They had an intuition score, every 100% of them, that was beyond what we see in average population. Now we know from our research that carers are more intuitive than the average person. They're tuned in to kind of spot things. And we found that these outstanding managers all had that extremely high ability to spot things in the environment, to spot risk in people, and it really was significant. And then one thing that we found, compared to other care managers that we've looked at, the outstanding managers had an ability to cope with stress in the working world, and in their own world as well, their own personal lives. Very, very strong coping skills when it came to stress. And that's something that I think is worth having a think about and thinking, how well do I cope in a crisis? How well do I cope at stress, various stresses that are hitting us? And this was just, the research just brought out these super, super strong scores. And the important thing that I think to remember about all of this is all of these things can be developed. None of it is stuck for life. So worth having a think about where you might be at the moment and perhaps if any of these you do fit in with. So now we've got a very solid foundation. We've got a solid set of values that all the staff are bought into. They all have ownership. Their culture's being driven by a great leader. And now we've got two little building blocks above that I'm going to briefly cover now that are going to help you get people through the door. So, first one, referrals. Now, what you'll probably find is that unless you have those three bottom building blocks in place, you might not get a lot of referrals. But if you do, you're going to have staff who are engaged and empowered. They're going to be getting referrals from their friends. Their friends are going to be hearing about what a great place they work at. And referrals is your lowest cost recruitment strategy because if somebody's just passing your details on to their friend, then you're not having to go through all the usual channels which cost money. So I want to share with you some research on referrals that was conducted by the Department of Training Industry. And they found that engaged teams 78% more likely to promote and refer the business that they work for. So what would it mean to you if your staff were promoting you 78 times more than they are now? Would that solve your recruitment issues? So it's an interesting one. And when we say meet client satisfaction levels, for yourselves, clients are going to be, yes, okay, the residents or the clients that you're supporting. It's also going to be their families. It's also going to be CQC. So it's worth thinking, yes, is all of this going to take a lot of time to put in place, but is it going to be worth it when it starts to pay off? Now, the other thing that I want to talk about, the other building block, is something that actually I'm not an expert in at all. But I want to bring it up because I'm ahead of myself. So one thing that was interesting that I just wanted to touch upon, how many times do you approach staff that have left the business? So if they've been gone for 3 months, do you ever approach them to come back? Because quite often staff, nodding heads, nice. So quite often staff leave because they think the grass is greener on the other side. And we actually had a client that said that they were surveying staff before they left, and the staff was saying that they were leaving because of money. But actually when they switched that and they started surveying them after they'd left, they found that actually they were leaving because of the culture within the company. So if you're doing all this work to change the culture and develop the values, then it's definitely worth approaching those staff that have left and enticing them back, telling them about all the great things that you're doing. It's a missed opportunity, and I can't quite figure out why care providers seem to be a bit scared of Facebook and social media. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not an expert, but I don't know if any of you know, I host a podcast. Is everyone familiar with what a podcast is? It's like a pre-recorded radio show that you can listen to in your own time. And I host a podcast, it's called The Road to Outstanding, where I interview different people, care homeowners, experts, managers, etc. And I interviewed a lady called Michelle Purse, and she is a Facebook expert, and she talked to me about why Facebook is your secret weapon. And she absolutely debunked every myth that I thought would be around why a care provider would not use their Facebook page to advertise their business. So, while I just touch upon this, think about this. Your competitor is probably not doing anything on Facebook right now. Has anybody got an up-to-date Facebook page? Has anybody posted within the last day or two? Oh my gosh, okay, great. Okay, so hopefully you're already on board with this. But actually, Facebook is a great way to connect with the people you work with, the families of the people that are within your business, and everybody within the surrounding community. And when it's done right, if you think about your website as being quite a clinical look at your business, a bit of a brochure, Facebook can be behind the scenes. It can be what it's really, really like to be there, live there, work there. And there is so much that you can do to share that. And if you're doing all this work with your culture, then it's a really great thing to get the staff involved with. Because if people start to see your business coming alive on Facebook, it's a very, very easy way to entice staff. And it's also a very easy way to entice clients as well. So I see this as having two main benefits. One is that you can empower a couple of members of your team to run the page for you, and then that means that you're giving people extra responsibility and they're feeling valued within the business. But also, if you're putting up different forms of media, pictures, videos, then this is all evidence that you can gather for CQC, ready for your next CQC inspection. Coincidentally, there's an episode of the podcast coming out on Friday, which is with an ex-CQC inspector who's got over 15 years experience. So if anybody's got an upcoming inspection that they think might be happening soon, she provided some absolutely fantastic tips in there. So, now, it all starts to come together. We've got a culture that's being driven by those values. The staff have ownership of that culture. The leadership team is really helping to drive that. All of that is enabling you to get more referrals. You've got a Facebook page that's buzzing with activity about how fantastic it is to work at your business. And then those culture statements that you developed with your own staff are helping you in your values-based interviewing, because you're now able to put it out there what it is that you're looking for from staff. People coming in from a job are probably better quality anyway, because they probably want to come and work for you. And now they're starting to get a really good feel about what it's like to work there. And you're then able to use those culture statements to take things further and actually really start to delve into what's behind the mask of the person in front of you. Now, if you want to take this a step further, you are then able to go on and profile your staff, potential staff or existing staff, and there's a number of different ways to do that. But as I'm the one on stage today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do it. But before I do, I just want to ask one question about what you look for in staff and what would be your top priority. Would you rather recruit for skills, for personality, or for people who make good judgments? So we work in the judgment sector. We different ways of describing what we do, but we measure people's values-based behaviours and their judgment capacity. And if these are things that you're looking to find out about people who are coming through the door, then these are the sorts of things that we can measure. We do offer a free sample. We are willing to bring it to life for you. If you've got a manager, or you are a manager, or you want somebody in your team to take it, we're happy to bring it to life and show you through all of our research what good looks like. So, there is one thing that I haven't been able to cover today, and it really is the missing piece of the puzzle that links all of this together, and that is induction. Does anybody have a proper induction plan in place? Yeah, oh wow, you're on it. When we talk at other shows, we have people just literally look at us with a blank expression. And actually, at one place I was talking at a little while ago, only one person said they had an induction plan in place. But a good structured induction plan can reduce your staff turnover within those first 3 months, which is the crucial point because that's when you've spent money and not seen a return, can reduce it by up to 50%. It's quite often the missing piece, it's quite often the piece that's not covered by a care company. And we actually have a onboarding or induction boot camp which is available in one email. It's got all the 6 steps in it. It's got an audio version so you can listen to it online, you can listen to it while you're on the go if you'd rather. And we'll happily get that out to anybody that's interested in getting a copy of that. So just let us know, grab us at the end or let us know your email address and we can get that across to you. So all of the resources that I've talked about today, the Outstanding Manager Study, which is available as a document, we can get that out to you if you want it. If you're interested in the Facebook information, the Facebook for care companies, not just homes, if you'd like links to the podcast to have a listen, especially the CQC episode, which is out on Friday, or you'd like that onboarding/induction bootcamp, then just come and grab us at the end and we're happy to give you all of that information. So, anything else, obviously tweet us, let us know your thoughts, and thank you for having me today.